In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate 5 different advanced methods for camera movement in Adobe Flash. Hello guys, I'm back with another tutorial here. I got some requests for how to do camera movement in Flash, in your Flash animation, so I want to go through that today. I've picked out about 5 methods that you can use, so that's a lot more than your standard tutorial. I don't think most people have ever covered these methods, and they're all the different methods that I put into use in my animations, and I'm going to share the secrets with you here, how I do them. So before I begin, I want to say that you can download a lot of these source files that I'm going to go through and pick apart and show you how to use them. You can download them on animatorguild.com. It's my website. You can also watch exclusive tutorials over there, so I suggest you go over there and become a member, and that way I can send you email updates when I bring out new stuff, new freebies to give out to you guys. So I highly recommend you do that before we begin. I will provide the link in the description, and there will also be something come up on the screen. Okay, now I've got that out of the way, we can go into it. The first one is the most obvious, and that is using the VCam. So a VCam, as you might have already heard, if you go on forums or something like that, if you go on Newgrounds, a lot of animators swear by the VCam. It is one of the easiest ways, I guess. I'll try and explain quickly what the VCam is. It's just a symbol that you can that has got some fancy coding behind it, and when you bring it into your scene, when you export the scene, it uses ActionScript in order to basically frame wherever that square is in the frame. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. I will also provide the VCam for you to download again over on my website, animatorguild.com. I don't tend to use it that much these days, even though it is a solid method of using it, and some people only use the VCam for all their movements. I'll try and get into a little bit about maybe why you should experiment with other methods as well as the VCam. The VCam is good to supplement your camera movements, but it's not good for like everything. Like, it can't do certain things. So anyway, I'm going to open up a file and demonstrate how it's going to work. Okay, so I've got a scene open here. You might have already seen my tutorial on this. This is taking it a little bit further when I want to use the camera. So I think this is a good scene to demonstrate some of the benefits and also maybe the negative aspects of using a VCam in a scene. So the benefit is that I do my animation, and then I just all I do is I just put it in afterwards and move it about, and it's very quick because I can just tween it very simply. As you can see here, I'm going to scrub through it here, and you see it just follows the action, and it's on its own layer, so you can do all of that. And I've actually supplemented it with panning the background. So basically I put the foreground moving against the direction of the background like that, and that gives it the effect of your camera actually slowly moving around the scene. It's just one of those methods that I find can make your scene look very nice. So this is often used in action scenes and stuff. Play through it again like this. One of the ways it differs from the next method that I'm going to show you is that you can have your scene be very big and take up more space than what the canvas contains, and it can go off the canvas and move with it. But this does mean that if you're doing a scene where it's very wide or something, you might end up, having to scroll across the screen, when really, if we look in wireframe, the camera viewpoint is here. So it can be a little bit annoying, I guess, because you're actually not keeping everything within the frame. And it kind of depends on your mentality. Are you someone who thinks about the action takes place in this big area, and then you want to focus on parts of it as you select them, or do you build everything up within the frame? So do you have the composition take place within the frame and it's quite rigid and it doesn't move away from the frame? I personally am kind of in second category, because I use things like rule of thirds ratio and the Fibonacci spiral to create a pleasing composition, and I find that it's easier to keep track of that if you just keep things within this frame and actually move things relative to where the frame is, instead of having things exist outside the frame and then moving your camera to that. But Toon Boom is another program which kind of has this inbuilt, within it, so you don't need action script for it, and there the camera is able to move as well. But the limitation with this VCam is that it gives the look as if the camera is actually tilting to where you want it to go, so it's just changing its direction, but it's not actually moving there. Because if you were to actually move a camera to the side, I'm not using the correct terminology here, I can't think of it at the moment, like panning, I guess you would call it. When that happens, actually you create a lot of depth within the scene because things move differently relative to how far away they are from the camera. In a VCam, everything moves at the same rate, so it can make your scene look quite flat, and it reduces the amount of depth because the background will move just as far as the foreground will. Whereas I find that it's a lot more dynamic. If, say, on a film set or something, you're not just like pointing the camera at different areas, you're actually moving the camera through the scene, and that creates a lot of depth and a lot of spatial awareness that you don't get within the VCam. So that's just something for maybe advanced animators to think about. If you're animating on an advanced level and you want your scene to take it to the next level, you might want to stop using VCams and actually start to tween the scenes individually. So that's going to bring me on to the next one is using graphic symbols. Now, I say use graphic symbols for this stuff because movie clip symbols are really there for game design primarily and for still objects. You should be using them for still objects within your animation, and when you're doing games, they have a big purpose within game creation in Flash. But I almost always stick to graphic symbols unless I need to blur something or create a glow or something like that. I'm going to get into that now. I'm going to demonstrate this to you. I think this is probably my most common method that I use. It's very similar to the VCam method, but it has a few differences, and some people find it a lot more tricky, and it is a little bit more intensive on the computer occasionally. So if you're working on a very low-end computer without a lot of specs, your computer might struggle with it. It's a possibility. So anyway, I'm going to bring up a scene demonstrating that now. So I'm going to start off showing you a nice simple way that you can do this. This is probably the simplest one that I could find. So I'm just going to loop this area so you can see it clearly. It's a reaction shot, so the girl is reacting to something that's happened within the scene. And you see her hair blowing and stuff, and it's on two different layers basically. You've got her, which is in kind of a static pose, she's still, but her hair is moving in the wind. So I've just taken those two layers, the animation on the hair and the layer below, and I put them inside a graphic symbol. Now the graphic symbol, you can see it play out in the main timeline, which is very useful because it means you don't have to export to test out what your scene will look like. You can just play through it in Adobe Flash itself. So if I play through it, you'll notice all I wanted to do is just move the camera a little bit downwards like that to just create some continuity and some flow. So you'll see that I'm not moving the viewpoint at all, it's doing all the movement for me. So this is really nice for previewing your animation on the spot. If we move out, you can see that I've got all of this within a symbol. I'll just take that off here. So I can select any of this and it's all within the graphic symbol, this whole thing. And I've just tweened it on the main timeline to go from here to here. So on this keyframe it's here, on this keyframe it's here, and I've just done a simple motion tween. I haven't even done any easing, don't need it right now. This is probably the most simple you can go. If I go inside, I'm going to double click inside and you can see that I've got 3 layers. I've got 4 layers actually. So I've got this layer, which is the hair. So the hair is doing its animation on this scene. It's being all wavy and looking good, I guess. It's rough animation, of course. This is an animatic. And on this layer, I've got the sketch. Basically what I've done here is I sketched out the hair very roughly first, and then I just made it invisible. I tend to not like to throw things away, so I just made that invisible by reducing the alpha to 0. And then on this shot, I've got this, so you see the head and stuff, and that I always draw out the head and then put the hair on top, because that way you are aware of where the hair should be going. It should be moving around the head, but that's a different topic. So I'm going to show you how to quickly set one of these up without much trouble. So another reason why I do these is because it's very easy to take this from your Animatic and then build upon the Animatic and create an animation out of your Animatic. It's a very smooth transition from that point. The Animatic is like a sequence of storyboards where you just show them in progression, and then adding animation to that. I find this method is very easy to do that. So as an example, I've just created a new scene here. I'm going to make loads of keyframes. I'm going to just quickly do a silly animation, just very quick, to show you what this can look like and how to do it. So we've got it looping for this amount of time. Let's say then in your Animatic you have another scene and it goes on here within the main timeline. We want to keep our main timeline nice and clean. So I'm creating another layer. You can do this for as many layers as you want, which is great. And then basically it will collect all of those all onto one layer, so you've just got this one thing on one layer that you have to worry about within the main timeline. It's almost as if Flash is like an editing program and an animation program at the same time, if you want it to be that. So on this layer I'm going to just put a box like this. Alright, and I'm going to end that there because the new scene will start, the new shot will start there as well. So now we see two layers like that. Now I can select them. Here's the key for doing it. I'm going to create a new layer, which is going to be the layer that we put our graphic symbol on once we've made it. So I select all the frames that I want. I copy the frames. Here I've got a shortcut, but you can do it by right-clicking, copy frames, and then Control F8 or create new symbol in here. And you make sure it's a graphic symbol so that you can preview it in the main timeline. Call it scene 1. I usually just keep the keyword scene within there so then I can search for it easily in the library. Do that, and then select this frame and paste your frames. You can do that by right clicking as well, paste frames. So now I've got this, and it's just in this kind of weird purgatory space which is within the scene. So what you do then is you go onto the layer that you want the graphic symbol to replace it. You go to library, here it is, scene 1, and you drag it on. So you'll see that now I've got an exact replica of what I have here, and you can see that it's moving like that. Now what I do is I put it into wireframe mode, and I drag it on top and make sure that they align, because I want it to be exactly how I had it in the main timeline. So then now they're aligned, you can see that there's just an exact replica of the previous animation on top of that. So now I've got double, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear those keyframes. So I'll just right click for that, clear keyframes like that. So now I've just got the same one again. I've got the exact same amount of animation, but it's within a graphic symbol. Now if we want to tween that, let's say I want to tween it down just a little bit. F6 on the frame there, so we create the tween between two frames. Because it's all within one symbol, it's just a single thing on the timeline. That means you can tween it and the tween won't break. So then you just move it down and then tween it. I've got a shortcut for that, but you can do that by doing the right click thing. And now you see the animation within it is being tweened, and it's just like a camera movement. Okay, I can also create, the good thing about this is I can, ease it however I want. I can create a custom ease like this if I want to make it more smooth and like that, or something like that. So that's that method. That's the most simple way you can do it. Now here's where it gets a little bit crazy, because you can tween multiple symbols and have tweens within tweens. That's what I call it, tweens within tweens method. So here's a few ways in which you can take this to the next level and have something a little bit more complex. So now I've got this scene here, and it's a little bit more complex. Basically it's this girl and she's jumping off this cliff face like this, doing a forward flip, I guess you would call it. So I've done a few things here. Basically, like before, I put it into a graphic symbol and you can see it here. I did the same process again within the graphic symbol. This allows me to add one layer of complexity to the tweening of the camera. So basically here I've done a motion guided layer. So I've created a motion guide here. You can see the line here. So I wanted basically for the camera to go like this. You know, I wanted it to move kind of in an arcing way, which would capture the way that she's jumping off this cliff and then down like that. So here's the tween. So once I've got the layer, basically I fixed it to a point here. You see the whole thing moves on that layer, and it's kind of like the opposite. So I want the camera to go like that, so I move everything in the frame around in the opposite way, like that. And I've also added some easing to that, which looks like that in the motion graph, because I wanted it to go like that and then slow up a little bit. You see it slows in the middle and then it goes fast again and it slows. So it's quite a complex one, I guess. And to top it all off, I wanted, this is why I put it into a second graphic symbol as well. I wanted it to be at first zoomed in a little bit and then for it to zoom out very quickly. You see how it crash zooms out like that? And I guess this kind of represents like the zoom feature on certain lenses and certain cameras. So I was able to just layer that on top because we had the animation here, and then I added that extra zoom afterwards. So this creates a really nice effect where the first bit of the motion path is still in motion, but then above that, on top of that, you create another camera movement of it coming backwards. And I really like this effect. In fact, I use this effect a lot, and I'm using it more and more these days. So I'll show you one other situation very quickly where I've done the same thing, because I feel like this is probably the best one, and I think you guys should use this method. So in this scene, I've got the camera to have a very lazy quality about it, so it's kind of wandering along and really taking in the view, because at the start here I'm establishing a setting and I want the viewer to just be able to look around the place and really get a feel for what it's like. So here in the shot I fade into it because it's quite a relaxed atmosphere here, and you see it lazily just wanders around until it settles on this focal point here, and then as you can see it just does a quick little zoom in just to show that that's the bit. So it's again this kind of zoom focus on your camera here. So it looks really nice when you layer it over another tween. So here I've done the same thing. I've gone into here and I've done a guided layer tween, and you can see the path of action here. It will always look kind of opposite to the way you want the camera to go. So that's another example. In this part here, basically I wanted the reveal to be kind of like an interesting way of doing it, you know? So the background, the midground and the foreground are all on different layers. So they move independently of each other, and I think I put some easing in here just by using the motion graph editor. And then the next step to this would be to actually put these tweened layers into their own graphic symbol and then have that as just one thing on the timeline. Notice how I'm using the thirds grid here to create a pleasing composition. So basically I wanted them to line up in the tween with these thirds grids. Using this method is really easy to do that. I just put the thirds grid in the background and then aligned them in this keyframe to go over them, right? And then in here I centralized them, so I kept them in the center, and this makes a very a very neat effect where I can precisely place what I want in the frame. That's kind of how I like to work some of the time. Other times I do it more intuitively, but in this case that's what I wanted to do. So I just had that on a background layer here, which I can turn off and on. I've also got a few other grids. I've got that grid, I've got that grid, and I can just flick them off and on if I want. I've got the original storyboard, which I hand drew there. Also, another method that goes along well with this camera technique, which I really like using, is to have a layer on top of all of your layers. It's like a master layer, so it's in the main timeline, and it's just this border grid, so it overlaps everything. So I use it because I really like being able to only see what goes on in the frame, because when you export it, your audience is only going to see what goes on in that frame, and you want to know what the audience is going to see. So I just create this black border, and it really neatens the whole thing up, and it means I can preview the animation without actually having to export it as an SWF file. So that's just one thing I like to do, and I recommend you guys try it out at least. Even if you don't use the tweening method, it can help. This thing is nice to complement the tweening symbols method instead of the VCAM method, because the VCAM method is very messy. Like if you open up anyone's scenes, you know, I've collaborated with a lot of other animators. I open up their scenes, they're using VCAM. Their stuff is just all over the place. It will be out of the frame and stuff, and it's quite hard if you're working with another person to understand what they're trying to get with that. Whereas this, it's all within the frame. You know that what goes on in the frame is what the audience is going to see. It's my preferred method of working. So that was multiple symbols, and then the next one is After Effects or Premiere. Okay, so I'm in Premiere now, and I've got an example clip of an animation that I made in school. Nothing fancy. It's actually a very silly clip that I will never use for anything. It's about two flour sacks and they're playing with each other. So I will create a new sequence down here, so it's on the timeline now, and over in this window you'll get to see what it looks like. So just play through it there. And I hand drew the whole thing on the light box, so that's why it's very rough. And it's got all my timing notes. It's just very rough animation, and I'm never going to use it. So I thought it'd be perfect for this video. And so the way you can do it, you select the clip here, and you, in the effect controls, you have these things come up here. So go down to motion, and then you've got scale and position. So before you do the moving about of the thing within the frame, you're going to want to scale it up at least just a little bit, because then you won't reach the border's edge. So then you can use the position to move it, and it's quite clunky because you're working with just the raw numbers here of like the coordinates where it is. And I don't personally like to use this method. I like to be a lot more intuitive and actually drag it around the stage, which you have the ability to do within something like Flash. You keyframe it, so you toggle keyframing. That creates a keyframe at the start, and then you can create a keyframe at the end. Just go to the end here, keyframe another one, and move it across. It's a bit clunky doing this. I don't personally use this method very much because of a few reasons, but the main reason is that it's just not very nice to do it when you can do it otherwise, and it's also kind of a last resort method. If you have done everything, you've edited it all, you've got it in post-production, and then you decide, you know what, I want to add a small camera movement here, then you can do that. It also messes up your composition because you have to scale it up so that you're closer in. Also, another method you can use in this situation, you can go into the effects tab in here, search in camera shake like that, and camera shake will come up here. You just drag that on top of your video clip there, and it will create a camera shake for it. Now you can't tell that this is shaking. It was a very rough animation anyway, so it looks like it's shaking anyway, but you can, in this tab here, you can increase the amount. So I could increase it to 10 or something, and then it would be shaking all over the place. It's like there's an earthquake going on. So you know, you can do that in Flash as well, but this I've got to admit, the camera shake in this is quite nice because you don't have to fiddle around with tweening the whole thing about. It will just do it for you. You can do this in Premiere or in After Effects, or even in other programs. I mean, those are the ones that I use, but you can also use Sony Vegas, you can use Final Cut Pro. Any editing program should have these kind of features in there. So yeah, that's that one. I don't recommend it, but you can do that if you want to. So that brings us to the last one, which is frame by frame animation. So you can actually animate environment moves, your camera moves, with frame by frame animation. This essentially means that you would be drawing everything in the frame and redrawing it for every frame of your sequence. So of course, the downside is it's the most labor intensive method because you have to draw it out so many times, and it requires a lot of understanding of perspective and maintaining proportions and other things. But the good side is that it looks absolutely amazing when you do it, and it completely takes your animation to a whole new level once you're able to do it. So I've just brought up a small example of where I have used it here, and I'll just loop this area here so you can see it. So the guy basically uses his wrist gadget thing to shoot a cable out and then swings under an archway in a building. So he does that, and then you see, and this is still in the rough animatic stage again. I like to show you guys animations which are already in production, not the past stuff that I make. But yeah, so that's an example. I can do extra effects on it as well, which I really like to do. Like, you see the motion blurs of the walls rushing past. It can look really dynamic and make you feel like you're actually in there with him. It also means it gives you complete freedom because you're able to move about within 3D space. I'll also put up another example right now on the screen of where I did it in Wildfire, where you take the point of view of the bird and move through the building. So it's good for shots like that. It creates a lot of depth. It's very dynamic. It's my favorite of all of them to use, but that doesn't mean that you should use them for every situation, because sometimes it's just not worth doing. Like, if you want to just do a simple pan across, which is very slow and very smooth, it doesn't make sense to do this method. But in very fast dynamic movements like this, then it might make sense to do the method. Now, the other one which is similar to this one, which has similar costs and benefits, is the 3D method. So you can actually reconstruct your animated scene in 3D and then move the camera about in 3D space. They do this in quite a lot of films and also TV shows. So they did it in Attack on Titan a lot. So the buildings in a lot of those action sequences are actually 3D rendered buildings. Well, they're actually 3D buildings with 2D textures put onto them. They also did it in a lot of the recent Studio Ghibli films. So Howl's Moving Castle, the castle itself, like the legs are done with 3D, and they use it for certain classic Disney films did it, like Treasure Planet and Atlantis. So yeah, it does get used a lot, but it's unless you're very good at compositing your animation, so that's making it look like it's all integrated properly with the correct lighting, it can kind of spoil it for your viewers because they will be aware that it's 3D. So a 3D thing in a 2D setting does look very out of place. So you need to know compositing methods within After Effects to be able to disguise that to make your 3D stuff look like 2D. That's a completely different video. I won't cover it here, but if you want to try out the frame by frame method that I've shown you here, you can try that out by watching my video on it where I go into a lot more detail of how I'm able to do it, and that should be a good help. I'll put it in the description and also up on the screen. So with that said, I want to finish this video off. Please leave me a comment of what you would like to see. This video was asked of by one of my subscribers, so you can do the same and I will answer whatever question with video or with a comment response. And yeah, head over to animatorguild.com to check these files out in a lot more detail. You can actually go into the file and explore how I've made them for yourself. It's a much faster and easier way of learning it rather than just watching this video and trying to work out from there. You can reverse engineer the methods I've used by going over to animatorguild.com. It's my website. You also get some extra tutorials and stuff. You get emailed by me when a new exclusive video is released. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week. Transitioning first into silhouettes is another option that you can try. This is kind of like a middle ground between stick figures and full body poses. I personally find this method to be